Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Will Cary. I'm from the Barnes Foundation. We're in Philadelphia. We're a private collection founded by Dr. Albert Barnes with a mission to promote the advancement of education and the appreciation of fine arts. We're primarily known for our collection of Impressionist and Post-Impressionist paintings, but we've also got African art, sculpture, metalwork, decorative art, and textiles. That's our building on Benjamin Franklin Parkway. We opened there in 2012, but for the purposes of tonight, I actually want to focus on the buildings behind our building. Because when we opened, we found that we got a lot of corporate support. And in the 5 years we've been there, we've actually grown to have one of the 10 largest corporate membership programs for any art museum in the country, both in terms of number of members and revenue. So we wanted to begin to engage more deeply with these corporations to see how we could do a better job of meeting their needs. What we realized in these conversations is that companies have inched closer to museums. Corporate social responsibility has become something has become a core business function for a lot of companies, even to the extent that they're promoting it as a primary driver in their ad campaigns. We're seeing the rise of concepts like creative placemaking, where companies partner with nonprofits, cultural orgs, social service orgs, and government agencies to help shape the character of a community or city. And we're seeing the rise of design thinking, where you take a creative approach and apply design principles to solve business problems. We've seen a growth in community investment and volunteerism, but especially companies wanting that to be visible. I think museums provide a great venue because they are inherently visible in their communities. In some cases, they're the biggest landmarks in their communities. And while I hate to generalize for 80 million Americans, it seems like we can say with pretty much certainty at this point that millennials especially care a lot about working at places that support them both professionally and personally, and companies who are making a positive social impact in their communities. So if we can agree that companies have moved closer to museums, why haven't museums done a better job engaging companies? Well, I think that has to do with where company relationships lie in museums, which is usually in a function called institutional giving, which is in your development office. Institutional giving generally covers corporate giving, foundation giving, and giving from government organizations like the NEA or IMLS. And that's fine, but when you lump corporate giving in with the other two, you tend to think of the gifts in terms of how can we align the brand, how much money are we getting, what report do we need to file at the end of the year, and what one or two stakeholders do we need to keep happy. So recognizing that we had a unique opportunity, what we did was take corporate membership out of institutional giving and put it with the individual membership programs. And when we did that, we began to think of engagement as something different. We began to count it the way we do engagement for our individual members. How often do they come? How many people do they bring with them? What educational and public programs are they attending? And what specific art interests do they have? One stat that's pretty interesting from the National Center for Arts Research report, which I'm sure many of you read a couple of years ago, is that corporate giving only accounts for 2% of museum giving. Yet, art museums have the largest average number of corporate partners of any cultural org. The report said the same thing. Museums average 47 different cultural partners. And while that's a pretty big number, I think we need to think about the hundreds and thousands of people who are potential audiences and donors behind those companies. So what we did in addition to moving corporate membership into annual giving was try to create a stronger foothold inside these companies to figure out how can we drive people to the Barnes. So we created a Young Professionals Leadership Board. Now, many museums have a Young Patrons Board or Young Friends Board charged with gala fundraising or driving individual membership. This group of young professionals is solely tasked with driving corporate engagement, getting their colleagues to participate in some way at the museum. What we found when we recruited these people is many of them already had leadership roles on volunteer committees inside their companies. So they felt like this ask from us aligned with work they were already doing, and we know that the lines are blurred for them between personal and professional development. So it really made it an easy task for us. We've had a lot of success with them helping to drive new visitors, and those visitors come for free because corporate membership enables the staff to come for free. We've increased opportunities for leadership development through this board, and we've promoted the museum as a place for off-site retreats, creative thinking, and also aligned ourselves with their education programs, which is something I'll talk about in a bit. One thing that these companies have that I don't think museums have tapped into is employee resource groups. These are large groups of employees. Most mid-sized companies have these. All big companies have these, who gather around an identity. Comcast, which is Philadelphia's largest company, has 8 of them. They have one for LGBTQ employees, African American, young professionals, differently abled, veterans, women, Hispanic Americans, Asian Pacific Americans. All these groups have their own communication structures, leadership structures, and company resources and dollars behind them with a mandate to go out and do things that are socially and professionally fulfilling for these audiences. Museums are the perfect place for us to be doing this work and bringing in these new groups. You see here that when we can expand the relationship with the company beyond just brand alignment, when we can break into several different parts of it, that all of a sudden the museum becomes the place that companies think of when they go out to design a new ad campaign, which Pico, the largest power company in Pennsylvania, did here with a huge advertising campaign about their community work. All of these advertisements featured the Barnes. They're on buses, subways, regional rail, billboards, TV ads. As a museum, we'd never be able to afford a campaign like this. But because we had such a deep and broad relationship at the company, we were the first place they thought of when they wanted to talk about community impact. And I don't want to seem too starry-eyed here, but I really feel like museums can be the place where companies come to solve some of their most difficult problems. This is an article from the Philadelphia Inquirer, came out just about a year ago. And it begins one Friday in June. Comcast CEO Brian L. Roberts made the short trip from the Comcast Center to the Barnes Foundation to make peace with a man many consider to be one of Comcast's most dangerous foes. This is an article about Comcast growth, but Brian Roberts talked specifically about a meeting he had with Reed Hastings, the CEO of Netflix. Netflix was seen as a natural competitor, an enemy of Comcast, someone who was pulling away subscribers. And Brian Roberts wanted to see if he could turn an enemy into an ally and a friend. And he tells this story, this was at the Chamber of Commerce annual meeting, about choosing the Barnes as a place to bring someone to try to figure out a creative solution to what many considered to be an intractable problem. And this is from a very large company. I hope that he's not the only Fortune 500 CEO who thinks of a museum as a place for this. And I'm looking forward to hearing all of your ideas. On Wednesday, I actually convinced the representative from Comcast on our Young Professionals Leadership Board to fly out and talk about her experience from a company perspective and from a donor perspective and a young professional perspective on providing next generation leadership and philanthropy. So I hope to hear from you all on Wednesday morning. Thanks very much.